Welcome to the place where we learn about improv, 'cause public speaking can take you so far. Improv speaking, say yes and flex your creative thinking. Improv speaking, say yes and flex your creative thinking.
Welcome, everyone, to the Improv Speaking podcast. So glad you're stopping by and joining us today for another fascinating episode. On this podcast, as you know, maybe if you're returning or for our new listeners, I like to talk to people with a background in improv, public speaking, performance, communication, and creativity, and everything else in between, which, there's some stuff in between that too. And we might get to it today because today's guest does all of those things and so much more. I can't wait to jump in and chat about all things improv and public speaking. We're going to have a really fun episode today. Let me tell you a little bit about our guest today, Pam Victor. Pam is an improv comedian, author, happiness coach, speaker, teacher, corporate trainer, and very nice person. On her bio, it lists nice person. I added the very nice person because she is a very nice person. Pam is the head of happiness, also known as founder and president of Happier Valley Comedy, which is the first and only improv theater in Western Massachusetts. Pam is the co-author of Improvisation at the Speed of Life, the TJ and Dave book, along with TJ Jagodowski and Dave Pasquesi. She is also the author of Baj and the Word Launcher, Space Age Asperger Adventures in Communication, which is a children's chapter book that uses sci-fi to teach social skills, which is so cool. Pam has been improvising professionally since 2003, and she received improv training from the I.O. Theater in Chicago, Annoyance Theater in Chicago, Improv Boston, Second City Teachers, and many more places. Please welcome the amazing, the talented, the super special, the one and only Pam Victor.
Wow, I'd like to meet this person.
She sounds great, and she's sitting right here. Isn't that something too? When you hear it, you're like, "Who's that?" Huh?
Exactly.
What do you call it? Your
the evil mind meanie.
Yes, your evil mind meanie comes in and says, "Who's that?
Who's that?
That can't be me, right?" And I know we'll be talking about the evil mind meanie later too, but just they always creep up. It always creeps up.
It's part of being a human.
Mm-hmm. Welcome, Pam. I'm so happy to have you.
Thank you so much for having me here. It's my pleasure.
Yeah. And I want to tell our listeners a little bit about how we met. We were introduced by Jim Young, who was on my podcast a few months ago talking about burnout and more specifically men's burnout. And he performs at your Happier Valley Theater, which is always, it's a small world there. And there are quite a few improvisers, but once you start meeting everyone, it's a nice little improv family circle we have here. And that's really one of the things I love about improvisers is they're so supportive and willing to help. And Jim introduced us. So I'm just so appreciative of that.
Yeah, it's such a small world. One time my dad took us on a trip to Israel several years ago, the whole family, and it was really, really fun. And I found myself in Tel Aviv. I was like, I'd really love to meet an Israeli improviser or somebody who does improv in Israel. So I go online, probably go on Facebook and like, who knows somebody here? And it took like not even a half hour. Then I got a name of somebody. A day later, I'm sitting in a cafe with them. We talked for hours and hours, had tons in common. We had knew several of the same people. It's a very small improv world.
That's so awesome. That's so cool. International improv. That's amazing. I haven't ventured out that far yet, but it's on the list. What a special moment.
Oh, it's so cool. When I was brought out to the Munich Improv Festival right before the pandemic in 2019, it was so cool. And I got to work with the class that I was working with was international. And it's just so fascinating how there are some slight cultural differences, but for the most
For
part,
sure.
we speak the same language. Improvisers speak
Yeah.
the same language.
We have the same trainings, the same skills that we learn. And that's cool to see that combined, even though, yeah, the language barrier and maybe communication's a little harder. That is super cool.
The culture is the same of
Yeah.
improv. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm always so blown away with how supportive the improv community is, and more specifically the applied improv community, which I know you're a part of as well. Everyone's so willing to share and help and support, which I know is a big skill of improv, of course, but we really practice what we learn and preach too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That was very helpful for me in getting started in improv and writing about improv, is that every time I asked people, they said yes.
Yes. I love that too. That's so true. And we get so in our heads, our evil mind meaning say, no, you can't even ask. How dare you ask? But like the worst thing they could say is no. And improvisers rarely say no.
Right.
So you never know what you're going to get until you ask too.
Right. And I don't, yeah, I think it's my improv training, but also from my life experience, because I had a really atypical growing up time, that I do ask because I feel like it can't hurt. I always let the person say no to me rather than me say no to myself before I even ask.
That's
So
great. Yeah.
I even used it at work. I was like, let's let them say no to us and see what happens. Let's not talk ourselves out of it first.
That is something I need to learn. I'm still learning that skill. So thank you for sharing that. That's a great life lesson there. Well, and I want to know, our listeners want to know about your improv journey. So you've been improvising professionally since 2003. So that means you probably started before that. So tell us the whole story. We're here. How did it all go down?
It's funny because it probably started professionally and, learning it as an adult in 2003 as well, because I was in my very first improv class. So I took an improv class when my younger child was about 3 years old. I saw a
Okay.
flyer in the grocery store and it looked like improv comedy, seemed like something like that would be fun. I just wanted to get out of the house, do something different. I was a stay-at-home mom at the time. And so I took the class. I got so excited about it. I had, might be familiar to you and many of your listeners, that what I call the Improv Angels song. You're sitting in improv class and you hear that, ha, ha, that song, and you're like, this is me. This is for me. This is my thing. That's
I've never
how
called it
was.
that, but I relate. Yes.
Yes, you're just like, this is my thing. And boy, was I intense about it. I was hard to hang out with in some ways during those times, because it was just, it's just the one class I took with a bunch of other people at this, like, probably in this old building somewhere. But I loved it. And I was talking about improv to everywhere I went. And so I happened to be in my local town. I live in a tiny town in New England, and it was I bring the kids to the library, and I was speaking to my librarian about improv, how great improv is, how much I love it. And she's like, wow, we could do an improv show here. And I said, oh yeah, I'll totally put that together. No problem. Yeah. And she's like, okay, how's October 19th? I'm like, that sounds great. Let's do it. And so I left the library and I realized that I didn't have an improv team.
Oh, no.
So
Very
I
yes
ran.
and of you.
I was like, okay, so I ran back to class. So by that time, I had taken that one class. And after that first class, I think I said to the teachers, I don't want to stop. Like this 6 weeks cannot be the end of my improv career. I was like, if I try to get people to sign up for the next class, will you teach another class? And they're like, sure. So I got like almost everybody to sign back up, and they get a few more people to join. And so by that time we were like 2 or 3 classes into the second class. And so I went back to the second class, to the class, and I was like, okay, if this person agree to do this gig with me, I'll say yes, I'll do it. And they did. And, I got a bunch of people. because it was a library and I wanted to work with women. I found in that class, the women were the really good listeners, and I enjoyed performing with the women in that class. And so we called it the Ha Ha Sisterhood. Was
Oh,
that
nice.
name after the book? And yeah, we performed in that library, and we did a spate of library shows. How we got started, like this free library show, like wherever anybody would put us up. That's how. So that's how I got started, and I just kept doing it, and it grew and grew, and through little steps. And then I started producing a monthly show, and I got involved with Improv Boston, and I would bring them out to perform at the monthly show for many reasons. One was I wanted my performers, the people in the ha-has, to see other kind of improv, and they weren't as interested in me as going out to other cities and looking at improv, because we really didn't have that much where I was at the time. And then they would come out and also do a workshop at the same time.
Oh,
So
cool.
Sort of by necessity got into these cool opportunities. And that's how I learned how to improvise, is by taking these little workshops. I was too far away to Boston. It's 2 hours away from my house. I think I'm trying to remember the order of things. I think then I started to get involved with, I can't even remember.
It's been so long.
It's been so
you've
long.
forgotten the order now of the origin story.
I know I don't remember the order, but I remember I had this cookie monster of improv in me. I this need to do more and more and more. So I really wanted to learn from other people, and I was at home by that time. I was a stay-at-home homeschooling mom, so I really couldn't get out there very much. So I started writing a blog post called Geeking Out With, where I would just try to get improvisers to sit down with me, and I'd ask them every question I could possibly think of as a way of learning more. And the first person, this is a weird story, a little tangent, but the first person I ended up interviewing was Chris Gethard.
Okay.
Do you know him?
I'm familiar. Yeah.
He's from New York. He does a podcast. He's been in movies. You might have seen him. So I ended up asking Chris. I went to see him perform in Boston, and he was about to set out on a cross-country trip in an RV with a bunch of other comedians. They had no plan. They were just going to post on social media, and whoever told them that they could crash at their house or whatever, they would go and perform for them. So they probably went from college to college. And their last stop was going to be LA. And so I wanted him to deliver something to Jason Mantzoukas, who he was friends with. Do you know who Jason Mantzoukas is?
Yes.
He's in Big Mouth. Yeah. So because the year before, or maybe just a few months before that, I was at Del Close Marathon, which used to be put up right by the Upright Citizens Brigade Theater in New York. They don't do it anymore, but it was 3 full days of improv, and it was fantastic. And I would, during my improv Cookie Monster years, I would go and I would just sit there. One weekend I clocked 18 hours of improv. I watched 18 hours of improv.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
wow.
I'm telling you. That was hard. So during one of
Obsessed
those,
is an understatement.
Oh, exactly. There should be a new word. So during one of those, Jason was performing. He was supposed to perform in this show he called First Date or something like that, or Blind Date, with Jessica St. Clair, who's also a fantastic improviser who's on TV a bunch. And Jessica couldn't be there. So he's like, I'll do a first date with somebody else who would like to do a first date with me. And I raised my hand, and for some reason he picked me, and we had this great time. And it was just really, really lovely. And I hadn't been really performing. So that at that point, so I was on a stage in front of a bunch of people. It just felt so good. And I reached out to him afterwards, and I was like, thank you so much. Didn't hear anything from him. But then 6 months later, he ended up sending me an email, and he said, somebody asked me what the most fun I had improvising this year. And it was the thing that we did together. And I was like, oh my gosh.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
That's
and so we ended up
awesome.
just having this pen pal situation that was, just weird. And so I, as a joke, sent a bra across the country to Jason with Chris Gethard. So that's how, it was a long, weird story, but that's how I had my in with Chris. And I was just like, okay, now that you did that for me, would you mind sitting down for a couple hours and letting me ask you all the questions I can think of about improv?
Yes.
And so and then I just went from one to another, just like throwing it out there and just like asking people who I admired. And more often than not, they said, in fact, I don't think anybody said no to me. Oh, the only person I had didn't really, he didn't say no, but he didn't say yes, was Mick Napier.
Okay.
I never got Mick. I got to study with him. I know Mick. He's a lovely guy. I could see why he would not want to do that, but he was the only one who didn't say, yes.
Technically didn't know, though. Just you didn't hear back. Yeah. So
He ghosted. Yes.
doesn't count. Yeah.
It's fine. It's fine.
That's amazing. I love the improv Cookie Monster. I like that you're just nom 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 all the improv, please.
All the improv all the time. And so then when my older kid went off to college, I had homeschooled her for 10 years. I was like, I either need to go back to teaching. I used to be a elementary school teacher, or I could do this thing where like, could I make a living doing improv? And that's when I started the Can I Make a Living Doing What I Love experiment, where I gave myself 12 months, exactly 1 year, to see if I could make a certain dollar amount exclusively through improv in my little county in Western Massachusetts. And I set the dollar amount as $16,000, which was around the poverty line for a family of 2 at the time, which seems like obviously it's barely enough, not really enough, truly not enough to live on. But it also seemed like more than I could dream of making at the time through improv. You know, I hardly knew any people who improvised full time, and I certainly had never made anything near that amount of money improvising, not even close. So I just kind of went for it. I just went for it. Yeah.
Well, I'm curious. You said you're an elementary school teacher before you homeschooled. What is it that you think you were so drawn to improv? Is it the play aspect? Because in elementary school, like there's a lot of play involved with the kids as we get to be adults. I'm just throwing it out there, a wild theory here. But, you know, when we become adults, we don't get to play as much and our creativity gets stifled. What do you think it was?
Well, I do love play. I mean, that is really one of my core values, and one of the core values of my company is play more. It's on the back of our t-shirts, and it's really important to me. And it hasn't stopped being important to me. Even like when I want a friend, it's really crucial that any good friend I have is able to play. Like play is very important to me. And anyway, like I like to play board games. I'm terrible at them, but I like to play card games. I like to joke around. You know, like any sort of playful spirit is really important to me. But I think about improv that really grabbed me was the collaborative creation.
Mm-hmm.
It was just so captivating to me that there's nothing. And when we're together in the moment, in connection with each other, we create something beautiful together, or silly together, or whatever, goofy together. That I think is just so amazing. And it laid on really well. It overlapped well with my interest in mindfulness and that sort of stuff. So I think that's what grabbed me. So, and it's fun. It's fun. So yeah, play and mindfulness and connection. I mean, it just like checks all my boxes.
Yeah, it's a win-win-win. It's very hard. It's not easy, but when you see those skills and just like you're in such a safe space too, in the classes and such with other like-minded people. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't think it's hard. I mean, it's easy to do it badly. Who cares how well you do it?
That's true. I've never thought of it that way.
Yeah, I try not to use bad or good in relation to improv, but skillfully and unskillfully.
Yeah, that's such a good point.
Right? Remember that first class? Like, you don't even know what you don't know, and it's just pure fun, and you're laughing at the dumbest stuff. You know, you just think it's all hilarious. And I know if I was looking at the work I was doing, I probably would be so like, oh my gosh, I can't believe, you know, I thought that was so great. But it's just so silly fun. Yeah, so oftentimes when I have students, in fact, I was just teaching an Improv 1 class a couple days ago, and was the third class they ever have taken. And we talk so much about quieting the inner critic. And I tell them, Malcolm Gladwell says it takes 10,000 hours till mastery. And now you've done like 4.5 hours. So like really be kind and gentle to yourself. And afterwards, some of them were like, that was a really hard exercise. We were playing subtitles or gibberish subtitles or foreign film, some people call it. Right. And they're like, that was really hard. And I was just like, no, it's not. Just do it badly. Just do it unskillfully. Just mess it up. That's what I say to students all the time. Mess it up. I don't say mess. I say a different word, but yes.
You're editing for the podcast.
Yeah, I don't want you to get a little E for explicit. Yeah.
Right. But I think everyone can imagine what that word is instead of mess it up.
Exactly. And I say that so consistently to my students and probably so loudly that one of my colleagues got me a mug, and that's what it says on the mug, because that's what I say to my students all the time. Mess it up. Just who cares? It's just us. The person who has the most fun wins.
Well, and that's been so helpful for me just in the 3 years I've taken improv is the letting go of perfection piece. I definitely label things as good and bad, and that's a lesson that I'm learning and a skill that I'm learning not to do. So to hear you phrase it as you're just doing it skillfully or unskillfully, and there are better choices that could have been made, but that's the choice you made, so it's fine. You can learn from it.
There are different choices that could have been made.
Right.
So reframing, like any judgment is unhelpful. And you can't, as I've been taught, I think it was Mark Sutton from the Annoyance Theater, who's one of the people who said yes to letting me interview them during Geeking Out With, but I ended up studying with him and becoming friends with Mark. And I think he's the one who said, you can't judge and be in the moment at the same time. Right. And you don't know, especially when you're in the middle of a scene or a business meeting or whatever it is, the thing that you think is a quote unquote bad thing ends up being helpful in the end. Some of the things we think are mistakes in our improv scenes end up being like the highlights of the show.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. You can't be judgmental and be in the moment at the same time.
Right.
I mean, you can, it isn't helpful.
You can't, you can judge.
Right.
And then you miss some of things that are happening. And then you come back and catch up. Right. Because the other thing is if we're, and I do this, it's just human nature. We judge, but if we do think it's not going well, so let's say the show, the audience is quiet. And by the way, that's what I think of them as quiet, not entertained or hating it or anything like that. I try to reframe it. I reframe it and tell myself, they're quiet because they're so struck dumb by my improv prowess that they just can't laugh. But if I think it's not going well, the moves that I make are going to be really clunky and inelegant.
Desperate.
Yeah. Right. Same. And it's as the application goes beyond the stage as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So whenever it's quiet, you just think they're so in awe of us doing improv up here, and they're thinking, I could never do that, or wow, they're so good that they just are forgetting to laugh. That's how you reframe it.
They're listening. They're watching. Because every time that I've done a show, not every time, but oftentimes when I've done a show and I was like, ugh, I just want to slink out the back door, it's like, I can't. But because it's my theater, I go and I've always done this when I produce a show, I stand by the door and I thank people personally for coming, for their time, because at least if we couldn't successfully entertain them, at least I could thank them for their time. So, and sure enough, I'll think we did like such a, show. Somebody will come up to me and say, that's the best show I've ever seen you guys do.
Yeah.
So you don't know. And every time I've had a show that has been a clunker, it has taught me a tremendous amount. So those are good shows too. Yeah.
I love this reframing. I'm just like taking all the mental notes right now. It's helpful to hear.
Well, and I think that that's the basis of how I approach improvisation and applied improvisation. So if we're going to prepare to get on stage and create a show without a script, if we're going to go prepare for doing a proposal on the job or running a meeting or doing a speech, the first step, I think, is to learn how to quiet your internal messengers of unhelpful judgment and fear. Which is what I call the evil mind meanie, or lately I've taken to calling them the chorus of unhelpful judgos, or Cujo for short. Or, another friend calls it the itty bitty shitty committee, whatever it is that's telling us these judgmental lies. We need to quiet them down, because that is the thing that gets in the way of being in the moment, responding honestly and authentically, of using our authentic voices, of communicating clearly, of being in true collaboration, of innovating, trying new stuff, being flexible, being resilient, wellness and well-being, like you name it, it gets in the way. So anytime I'm doing an applied improv workshop or keynote, that is often the thing we start with, is how to identify and quiet your internal messengers of unhelpful judgment and fear. They're normal, but we can quiet them down.
Well, and they never go away. So you're learning how to quiet them and respond to them instead of trying to just get rid of them completely, because that is an impossible task to do.
Impossible. Absolutely impossible. I heard a fact, and I should fact check this, but it came from a reputable source. One of my new favorite books is by Michael Stanier Bungay. He wrote the Coaching Habit.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
If you haven't seen it, it's fantastic. And the Advice Trap. And something he mentioned in the book is that our brains seek out danger 5 times a second. Right?
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I don't know how that's possible. I do have to look that up. So yeah, nobody quote me quoting something that maybe I've heard wrong. But in any case, even if it's not exactly that, the idea is, I think, sound.
Mm-hmm.
But there is no physical danger in an improv show or a business meeting, most likely, or even a speech, even though it sounds so scary.
Right. No physical danger. It's all emotional, mental. Yeah.
Yeah. And even the stuff that does have physiological effects on us, negative effects, usually is coming from our minds anyway. So it's what we've created in response. It's not the speech. It's our fear about the speech that creates negative physiological responses.
Yeah. I'm shaking my head in agreement, and I could just totally relate, and I feel all of that. I want to ask you about your experiment of, can I make a living doing what I love? And I mean, spoiler alert, you're here. So I think we know the outcome of it. When did you do this experiment? What year?
I believe it was 2014.
Okay, 2014. And I mean, we're talking about all these like mental dangers, quote unquote dangers we label as dangers. I mean, how did it feel in that year setting out on this experiment?
Well, I do think I approached it as an improviser, where I didn't let my fear get in the way of trying it. Again, I'm not sure if it's my improv training, my, natural optimism. I had a very strange growing up period where I changed schools every year from 7th grade on in different states, countries, all different, like, weird experiences, different schools. I was in France one year. I was at boarding school in California one year. I was at an inner city school in California for 1 year, like all these different, really diverse experiences. A small private school for gifted kids. So I had to be really, really resilient and just keep showing up and doing my best.
Were you an extrovert, or did you have to be an extrovert in those kind of situations?
I think I became an extrovert when I was little, really little. I was shy, and I'm still very shy. I'm shy. Like, I don't invite me to a party. I will not go.
Really?
Yeah, I'm an introverted extrovert. Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I do not.
Yeah.
I do not like parties unless I know everybody, and especially if they're improvisers, I'll probably go. But yeah,
Right.
I'm shy. But yeah, I had to not be shy because I had to make friends very quickly. And somebody told me, like, if you make one friend every day for the first week, then you'll have 5 friends, and that's all you need for the year. And I just took that literally. So I kept putting myself out there. So I think during the experiment, I didn't let fear stop me from trying something. I was in a total yes and mindset, where if somebody asked me to do something, and as long as, I could physically do it, I said yes to it, especially if it brought in money. So they asked me to do a speech, using improv. And I said yes. I had never done a speech before. It wasn't a very good speech, but they paid me. My next speech after that was better because I learned a lot. Yeah. So I just kept doing it and doing it and doing it. And I would just keep, like, I taught a class, and that class said, "Can you teach another class?" Funny, just exactly what happened when I was taking a class.
Yep.
They said the same thing. And I was like, "Well, what do you want to learn?" And they told me, and I wrote it down. And I was like, devised some level 2. I just like made it up, totally pulled it out of thin air. And I taught that class, and they liked that. And then I was like, I thought there was about 12 people in that first class during the experiment. And I thought there would like maybe be 12, maybe 20 people in the valley where I live who were interested in taking improv. So I was like, let me try one more class. And that class filled up. And so I just kept doing it little by little, teaching more and more classes and doing more and more applied improv. And yeah, I made my dollar goal in 6 months. And then
Woo.
After a year.
Well done.
Yeah. And after a year, I founded my company, Happier Valley Comedy, which is a 501c3 nonprofit. And we do shows. We have a full multi-level comedy school and applied improv branch. So yeah, we're teaching, I think we're running 10 classes this session.
That's so cool. Wow.
Yeah.
And I mean, would you still call it, feel free to answer this how you want, would you still call it doing what you love, or you're I'm putting you on the spot here a little bit. I mean, as you grow in the business, it's, you learn and you grow, it gets different from what you imagine. So, 2014 till now, almost 10 years later, is it everything you kind of dreamed it would be? That's the big $1 million question.
It really is. It really is. And I'm not going to give you a definitive answer because the answer is still happening, right? Because I'm experiencing it. And when I set out on the experiment, a friend of mine from college, I blogged about it. I wrote on Facebook about it. I went on the radio and talked about it. I was very, very transparent about it. And so she responded on Facebook. She's like, you're not going to love doing it anymore because you can't make a living doing what you love. And she's, first of all, not an optimist, but also runs her own business. So she knows. She knows.
Yeah.
And she wasn't wrong. It goes up and down. The Cookie Monster lives no more. I'll say that.
Because you're getting your fill. I mean, you've gotten your fill of improv cookies for sure.
Yes, but I thought it was a limitless. Like, I thought it was a bottomless well. Like, I really didn't think. Like, I clocked 14, 18 hours of improv in 1 week and 2 days. Like, I didn't think I could fill, but I did. So yes, I fulfilled a lot of my dreams during doing this so far. Like, I believe in manifestation, and I set out these goals, which is another thing that helped me through the experiment, where when I was afraid, I would just come back to, instead of worrying about not being able to do it, I would put my energy into what I was hoping to do, right? Because where attention goes, energy flows, and where energy flows grows, right? So, that's,
it all attracts.
Exactly. So, and one of the things on my manifestation goal was to be able to perform once a week and to be able to teach however many classes, I can't remember, was on there, and to make a certain amount. And I did all that. I'm doing all that. And the funny thing is now, just recently, I've cut back to I've cut back on performing, which I thought I never would do. So I'm in 3 main stage casts right now. And I'm trying to get down to just 1 cast performing.
Yeah. And then, like you said, it ebbs and it flows and it goes up and down and you go through different periods. But I mean, you're doing the thing. I think when every improviser starts and they really love it, like you, and they're like, man, if I could just do this full time, like how awesome would that be? Like you're doing it.
Right. And then I hired somebody else. So we had a second full-time employee, and together, that's Scott Braidman. Scott and I opened our theater almost 5 years ago. So we have a physical space. And then just 4 months ago, we hired our third full-time employee.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Because it was just too much for us to do alone.
Yeah. Hey, you're growing. That's amazing.
Yeah. And Jim Young, who you referred to before, who you interviewed before, our friend, wrote a book about burnout, which Scott read and then was like, hey, wait, we're burnt out.
Oh, wow. The impacts. Yeah.
So we need help. Because the pandemic has just, made everything much more challenging.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was very hard for theaters, any theater of the arts, including improv, to survive during COVID. So the fact that you've made it, I hope we're on the other side, made it to the other side. Yeah, it's very difficult.
Our physical theater was closed for 18 months.
Wow. Did you do classes online and stuff?
I did a lot of applied improv online because that translated well. And again, that was like one of those same type of experiment mindsets where everything shut down in one day. And it's funny because not funny. So Scott had his second baby on March 10th. So he was out on paternity leave. I called him March 13th and said, yeah, I'm closing the theater. Okay, bye.
Oh my God. Wow.
It was really intense. It was great in the end, looking back on it. We both went on furlough. And so he got to spend time with his son, which was fantastic. But the only gig that I had still after we shut down was a keynote address for a conference that had to do with IT, some computer nerdy technology thing. And they're like, can you do this online? And it was money. So I was like, yeah. Had no idea how I would possibly do it online. Everything I do is interactive. Yeah. Even if I'm doing a keynote for 100 people, it's interactive. So I was like, I don't know how we're going to do this, but I said yes. And we figured it out. And I learned so much. Like, this was my first time on Zoom. And so I learned how to do a breakout room. I know.
Which I don't know. Were breakout rooms a thing when Zoom first started? I feel like they weren't that big, at least. People weren't using them.
Well, in the beginning. Yeah. In the beginning of the pandemic, we did. And because the guy who was helping me, who was my liaison, was a tech guy, he knew how to do it. So he just did all the tech for me so I could see it. And I started doing it. I did teach some improv classes, but I really, really hated it. And I didn't think it was, I just sort of like making love to someone when you're in a different room. I don't know. It was just ridiculous. I don't know. It's just and we performed, and we have lots of content that we recorded and performed online during the lockdown, which was fun, but it's so weird. Then you close the computer and you go upstairs, and it's just so weird. The beauty of what we do is it's in person, and it's together, right? That's the part of it that I love, is connection with other people in the moment.
Yeah, I'm glad we're past the online classes. I know they're still being offered. Yeah, knock on wood, knock on your head. And it was a great way to meet people from all over. I mean, I made some fantastic connections. So Absolutely. I'm very grateful for it. But if I have the choice between online or in person, I'm going to choose in person every single time.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, always. And that's, again, back to the judgment thing. Like, what felt really bad at the time ended up, when you look back on it, well, we learned from it. My students weren't studying with me. I'm sure they would have, but I just felt so lousy that it's just not worth it for my time and even the limited money that came in. But they got to study with a whole bunch of other cool people from Chicago and New York and LA, which benefits our community in the end.
Yeah, that's so true.
Because they're trained, differently, and they bring in new stuff, which is great.
That is cool. I want to ask you about your book with TJ and Dave. So Improvisation at the Speed of Life, which that book has been recommended by many teachers and a lot of classes I've taken. They recommend read this book. So when you said, "Oh, I'm the co-author of this book," I was like, "Wait, I know that book and I haven't read it yet. It's on the list of reading materials, but I recognized it." So how did this idea of this book come about?
When I was writing the Geeking Out With series, I was trying to get out everybody I could. I interviewed Susan Messing, who's fantastic, all these cool people, Mark Sutton from Annoyance. And I had seen at that point, Trust Us, This Is All Made Up, which is TJ and Dave's documentary, which you could get online. You can get it rented on Amazon or buy it. It's pretty accessible, very affordable. And for anybody who hasn't gotten to see TJ and Dave, they're probably two of the best improvisers in the world and widely considered to be two amazing improvisers. Yes. They're very, very well regarded internationally. And yeah, like you say, it's hard to take a class specifically in a big city, especially Chicago, without having them brought up. And, their show is just amazing. And so when I watched Trust Us, This Is All Made Up, like I remember this visceral feeling of like the bar of improv being raised. Like it was in my mind, this rusty sound of the bar being raised. Because they do a approximately 53-minute show, 2 performers, they play multiple characters. It's slow, patient, long-form improv. It's beautifully theatrical. And it just expands the boundaries of improvisation and what improvisation is able to do. So, of course, I wanted to interview TJ and Dave. And coincidentally, TJ is from Holyoke, Massachusetts, which is near where I live. And
cool.
And his family lives here, right? So his mom, I found out, was hosting a fundraiser, and she brought TJ and Dave to come in and perform for them. And I'm like, I want to go. And it was before I could even get a ticket. It was sold out.
Wow.
And so, yeah. And it was at this tiny little place called, it closed during the pandemic, but it was called the World War II Club. Or the Dub Dub Club is what we called it. And it was just like this bar, it wasn't as lofty as the show that they were performing. And so I'm like, I don't have a ticket, but I'm going. And I said to my friends, you can't come with me because I'm getting myself in, even if I have to crawl through the window, but I can't promise that I can get you in. So I went and I just showed up and they're like, we're sold out. I'm so sorry. And I just said, you don't understand. I love improv so much. And TJ and Dave are just like gods to me. And I've never seen them before. And I went blah, 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 went on and on. I'm pretty sure it was TJ's mom who was there. And she was like, you can take my ticket. Here you go. Go.
Oh my gosh.
So
wow.
I went in and I saw the show and it was as wonderful as I dreamed it would be. And after the show, I forced myself to go up to Dave because TJ was just swamped because he's a hometown boy. And I went up to Dave, no one was talking to him. And I was like, I introduced myself and then I just forced myself to say, I write this series called Geeking Out With, where I interview improvisers. Would you be okay with if I interviewed you? And he said, sure. And I freaked out. And
he said yes.
He said yes. So I interviewed Dave. He actually sat down with me twice and did the interview. It was fantastic. It was so much, it was great. Dave's a prickly pear, he's an interesting character, but it went well. I wrote it up and I was like, great. I was just so satisfied. Like that was it for me. And then I got a DM probably on Facebook from TJ who said, you know what? I really love that interview you did with Dave. Good job. And I was like, holy crap. I was like, if this is the pinnacle of my improv career, I am happy. That's
Yeah,
everything.
absolutely.
But of course, because of my improv Cookie Monster, I wrote back, thank you so much. It means a lot to me. Can I interview you too? And he said, it took me a year to type out this. I typed very slowly. And that's the way I did the series is I would type questions and they would type answers. We did it all
Okay.
through PM basically because I was a homeschooling stay-at-home mom. Like I didn't have time to record it and to transcribe it and to edit it. So it just cut and paste, baby. I did edit it, but
Wow.
not very much. So he said no. And then it ended up that summer by this small miracle in a lot of charity of the people around me helping out with the kids. I went to Chicago, to IO Theater in Chicago for the 5-week intensive, which was a dream come true. I always said it was one of the best 5 years, one of the best 5 weeks of my life. I just studied, watched improv with amazing people, talented group of people. It was just amazing, 24/7. It was so great. And so while I was there, I was trying to, TJ was always hanging out at the bar after a show. And cause he performed like 5 nights a week. So I saw everything I could with him in it cause he's so good. And so I tried to screw up my courage to like, okay, can I interview you in person? You don't have to write anything down. And I couldn't. I was just so.
Oh, yeah.
So I emailed him and I said, I've been trying to get up the courage to ask you. So I'm emailing you to force myself to ask you if you'll let me interview you in person. So I just put myself in a position where I couldn't say no. And then after, that day I went up to him and he's like, hey, Pam. And I was like, oh my God. And
he knows me. He knows me.
Exactly. And I think it was not even 24 hours later that I was sitting in TJ's living room, asking him every question I could dream of to ask him about improv. And it was amazing. That one turned into like a 3-hour and I videotaped it because I didn't want to miss a word. Yeah, it was just so cool. And so then after that, I was like, this is a book. This is a book. It's just so good. Like everything they said about improv, it just hit me right in my sweet spot because they also take a very mindfulness-based approach, even though they don't call it that. And so I wrote to them once again, just like getting out, what do they say when you get up in front of your skis? You just like, I just threw myself, I was like, why not? So I just wrote them. I said, I think you have a book in you. I said, the Geeking Out series was so good with both of you. And there's so much amazing material in here. You have a book and I think I should be the person to write it. And so I sent that to them. I know, right? What balls? Why not though? Why not?
Yeah. I mean,
what's the downside?
like, wow, that's incredible.
There's no downside. They're not friends of mine. I don't need anything from them. Like worst case scenario, they say no or tell me I'm an idiot. So, okay, fine. TJ and Dave think I'm an idiot. Now I have a good story. So I hear nothing from them. And then I wrote them again. And then I got an email back from them and said, we've been talking about it and we do think we might want to say yes to this.
We might want to say yes.
Yeah. And so I wrote back, I was like, great. What time works for you for us to talk about it? Nothing. Crickets. Nothing. And it was so bad. Like I remember bemoaning to a friend. I was like, I can't email them again because it's like we're verging on stalker situation here.
Right.
It's getting annoying. And my friend said to me, he's like, do you know what the book looks like? And I said, I know exactly what the book looks like. The table of contents is in my head. And he said, send that to them. And so I did. That's what I sent them. And it's almost exactly the table of contents that it ended up being. Almost exactly, like very few changes to that. So that was the tipping point that got them to be able to see it and to be like, okay. And so it got more serious. And and we moved it. Eventually we were writing together. I spent 18 months, I think, working on it together where I would interview them for a few hours. Then I would transcribe it and spend about 2 weeks editing it and making it into a chapter or half chapter or what it ended up being. And then I'd interview them again and then form it into a some more. And so we, little by little, we ended up doing it that way. And then after that, they sort of took it for another few months and had their way with it after that.
And that was while you were doing your experiment, or that was before your experiment?
It was before the
Okay.
experiment. Yeah.
Okay. So you focused a lot of energy on that, and then you did your experiment after that.
Yeah, it was probably not too far after that. And while we were writing that book, sometimes I'd be like, oh, but it sounds so much like mindfulness and you should say this and say this. And they're like, well, TJ would say, put that in your own book, Pam. That's not in our book.
Oh, okay.
Like, okay. So now I'm writing my own book for my students, and it's called The Joy and Ease of Improv is the curriculum that I created. And so it's called The Joy and Ease of Improv Companion Book, which has taken much more than 18 months to write.
Well, you have a lot going on.
I got a lot going on.
Not that you didn't have a lot going on back then either, but you just added to your plate.
Yeah, I thought I was busy, but no, it's a different level of busy. Yeah.
Well, I wanted to ask you about your joy and ease, just to switch gears, since we're talking about writing, and that you wrote the Joy and Ease of Improv curriculum. Mm-hmm. And do other theaters use that too?
Nope, they do not.
Okay, yeah. So, and your theater uses that.
Comedy. Yeah, and I'm the one who I always teach Improv 1, and I teach Improv 3. I always say you have to drag those 2 classes out of my cold dead hands. Yeah, I love those ones. And Improv 1 is called The Joy and Ease of Improv, Discovering the Joy and Ease of Improv, and it's really focused on quieting the inner critic and just practicing, just quieting the inner critic and learning improv skills. And there's some basics of improv, but really it's about quieting the inner critic. And Improv 2, The Joy and Ease of Improv 2, the subtitle is Jump into the Unknown and Catch Your Friends. So it's about just like getting out there and supporting each other, because being of service is one of our core values. And I think that's the main job of an improviser, and which is basically what TJ and Dave taught me. Is your job is to be of service to the moment, to your scene partner, to the show, first and foremost. That's the main job. So it's just jumping out there, jumping out and trusting. And there are a lot of short form games in improv too, but we use short form as a way to practice those skills, not to play the games for performance. Nobody performs. We don't do student showcases for a very long time in my theater. And then 3 is all about emotional point of view, and 4 is all about 2-person scene work, which is the heart of improv. So that's more long form improvisation. And then there are other advanced improv classes that we teach in my school, but they're not part of that curriculum, because you have to go through those first 4 levels at least, or at least the foundation, before you could take anything else.
I was just thinking back to just my improv experience, and sometimes you jump in and skip those, the joy and ease part and explaining it, and you jump right into like 2-person scenes and finding the game of the scene and the who, what, where, and it's fun. Like there's certainly joy and fun in it, but sometimes you miss the ease part and the mindfulness part. Like it's in the subtext, but it's not just fully explained and discussed. Like it could be helpful.
The text. It's the text. In fact, I don't teach finding the game. I definitely don't teach finding the game. I don't teach who, what, where, whatever that is. I've heard people refer to it in different ways. I don't even teach yes and. I don't use the terms yes and. I teach that my definition of improvisation is acceptance of the reality of the moment and the agreement to move forward together with joy and ease. And so we certainly use that, and that's really what yes and means. Mm-hmm. But I don't use the words yes and, because I don't say anything about rules. I say there are no rules. I'll give you some guidelines, because if I give you rules, we're all breaking them, because first of all, they're meant to be broken. And second of all, if you think that there's a rule, don't ask questions. There's some rule that some people teach. I don't teach that. But if you think that's a rule, you're going to get into a scene and ask questions, because that's what we do. And then you're going to start judging yourself, and then you're going to get stuck. And then you're going to hear what I call the red screen of, right? You just so not so good. That's not a good place to be.
I think I have that scream of in the middle of every scene almost. Sometimes, like if I can't figure out how to sustain it or keep it going, it's like deer in headlights, like
So that's when you take a breath, feel your feet on the floor, look into the eyes of your scene partner because they have your back and they're there for you, and try to make the next most joyful move. How can you facilitate the fun? Just the next thing that's the most fun, which is like another TJ and Dave thing, the next little step, right? You don't know how the show's going to turn out. You don't have some big idea in mind, the way I approach it. What's the next fun thing for both of us?
I love that. I'm just like soaking in that right now because that needs to be heard and said sometimes, because often the note is, well, what's the game? Like, find the game move. And I like that though, like facilitate the fun. How can I respond with joy and ease here?
Right. Because those are only the two assessment tools that I use in improv. What was joyful? What was easeful? What stopped you from being in joy? What stopped it from being easeful? Or what made it clenchy, which is the opposite of easefulness? That's how I think you can assess a scene most helpfully. And that's what that assessment helps you learn what moves to make and practice, like focuses your practice on the thing that's most helpful to become skillful. I think the game of the scene or any rules puts me in my head. Mm-hmm. And that's not where the scene is. The scene isn't in my head. The scene is in the moment between the two of us, or all of us up there together, which is another reason that we don't perform right away. I know a lot of other schools do, and it works probably for other communities that have people who are really super psyched about performing. But in my community, people aren't really interested in performing. The average student at Happier Valley Comedy is a middle-aged woman.
Which is great.
Yeah, it's super great. I just have my one class that I think is half and half, and it's kind of more young guys. And I was like, oh my gosh, we actually have like 4 young guys in the class, which is amazing. And I say to them, don't worry, there are others around. But most of my students aren't clamoring for the stage. They do it because they say it's cheaper than therapy. It's just, like you say, play. It's fun. It's a way of connecting together. So if I had them performing after Improv 1, I would probably not have a lot of students in Improv 2. They don't perform until the highest level class in my school. So you probably will have been taking classes for at least a year, but maybe closer to a year and a half or 2 years before you'll perform in a student showcase. You could perform on your own, of course, and that will support that and provide a stage time, but
right.
We don't do student showcases.
That's interesting. And you just recognize the need of your community, and that's what they want. And certainly, yeah, if someone wants the stage time, they can get up there and work it with you and plan it. But that's really cool. I love this approach that you have.
Because I have a lot of students who came in not in being interested in performing. And I'm thinking about like 1 or 2, my friends Sally and Mandy, and they didn't think they were going to perform. Sally started taking classes. She's a book agent, and she wanted to learn how to public speak, be more comfortable in public speaking, because she had to do that for her job. And it helped her, and there's no way she was interested in performing. And then over the next maybe after a year or 2, she became interested in performing. And now she's found Mandy and Sally both, and many of them in those classes are part of one of our main stage casts, one of our most popular casts. So
look at them now.
Yeah, you never know.
Oh, so cool.
I want to give them the time. You don't want to put that pressure on them. I give them the time to fall in love with it and feel good about it, because confidence is really, really important. And you can't teach it. I can't teach confidence. I could set the table for a confident performer, but I can't teach people how to be confident. I could teach them how to pretend, which sometimes I do with some of my casts.
So how does your companion book, it's kind of related to your curriculum, just more in like book form than like how to teach improv?
Yes. So it's what I do now is I send all my students what I call homework, but not really. It's just an email after each class that pertains to that class. And it might be some of my thoughts. It might be geeking out with, a part of an interview that I've done. It might be a little section of the book that I thought was interesting, of improvisation of the speed of life. So what I'm doing now, the book is those emails basically, but much, much more well thought out and edited and in book form. They correlate to each week. So Improv 1 is an 8-week class. So chapter 1 of Improv 1 is supposed to be read after you take that first class.
Oh, so cool.
So it
Okay.
correlates to what we're teaching in class and the theme of that class. And I'm also hopeful that other people will find it useful, because I think a lot of this stuff is universal.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And it'll save you some emails, right?
I won't be sending those emails anymore after that, but it's going to be
all the work you do on the book, right? Like you're not saving any time, but we can just reframe it that way, right?
Exactly.
That's so cool. I can't wait to see it and read it too, because like you said, it is very universal. Even not taking those classes, the skills and what we're talking about here is awesome. This different perspective is really refreshing to hear. Just dealing with some of the, in LA, it's a little more competitive sometimes. And just hearing this perspective is nice. And not to say that I'm very competitive with improv, because I'm not trying to do that. I didn't take improv for that reason. I took it for public speaking, to be better at impromptu speaking, table topics, and Toastmasters. And it's kind of, the love has grown and evolved. But hearing this perspective in a not so competitive way, it's nice. Thank you.
Well, because even if you're in a competitive place, and I get it. Yeah, I know. That's all I wanted to do, is to be in a competitive. I wanted to live in Chicago or Boston. And it's funny because like that was my dream. And because I couldn't get that, it ended up creating my own dream, and it turned into this thing that's different than anything else that's out there. It's related to a lot of stuff. And I think IO theater, I am a direct descendant of IO theater, Chicago philosophy. But improv, as I was about to say, like, even if you're in a competitive place, improv is a journey without a destination, which is why people are doing it for decades and decades, because no matter how long you've been doing it, you could have a terrible show and will. And will.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
I've been doing it for 20 years. Tomorrow's show could be a real stinko. Who knows? Right. And I'll learn something for it. But there will never be a moment where any improviser will say, I have arrived. That's it. I've gotten there. Even
no one will ever say that.
Nobody will ever say that. I mean, if they will, they're lying to you, because there's no such thing. It's like anything. It's any great art form. Like, it's just is not. Yeah, it's so silly to say improv is a great art form, but I do think it is.
I agree.
There's no destination. When writing the book, I called, and sometimes people call TJ and Dave masters of improv, and there is no better way to get them annoyed by saying that. And they said to me, and it might be in the book, I can't remember, that we are not masters and we never will be. And they say that in part out of good old fashioned Midwestern humility, but also because they know that there is no end all. I've seen them be not great. I've seen them perform with an all-star cast, and it was, and I know they didn't feel good about it. They can have a terrible show. They can have, their terrible show is different than, my terrible show. I know, but
right, me too. Yeah, for sure.
They still feel as crappy as I do after a show that didn't feel good. So there's never an arrive. There's never a destination. There's never a last stop. And the other reason we say that is because the minute you think you've arrived in improv, you set yourself back. There are many reasons why it's unhelpful to perform as if you think you're the best master improvisers. I think, again, the confidence is great, and to feel confident and good about yourself is very helpful and will help you be a more skilled performer. But if you think you're God's gift to the world, the improv world, you stop being in the moment in response to your scene partner. I remember it was David got some award. There's this award that they give in Chicago. They call it the Jeff Award. And so in his acceptance speech, he said, the fact that I'm receiving this award only means that my steam partner did the best possible job.
Oh, nice. Well done. Yeah.
Right. So what does it even mean? So now the part of it you asked me about, is it still what I love? I don't have that fire anymore when I perform. I did a great show. I did a show that I really, really loved. We all really loved last week. It was so much fun. The audience enjoyed it. It felt good. I got high off of it, that feeling. I am not able to see my work, so I'm not sure what I did or what I could learn from it. But it's not the same. I'm not dying to get up on stage again. I just lost. It's fun in the beginning, where you are 3 years in. Enjoy that. That's why I always try to tell my students, I'm like, enjoy it. Enjoy it. Enjoy having terrible shows and being so determined to have a better show that you want to go rehearse again. Or that you want to spend 2 hours after a show talking about it. That doesn't last.
Thank you. That's helpful to hear, because I think we all put so much pressure on ourselves to be quote unquote good at it. And then the show is not quote unquote good to our expectations that can clearly not be attained. So enjoying the moment where we're at in our improv journey is huge.
Huge. It's everything, in fact. Right.
Yeah.
And then it's my job to enjoy the place I am and in improv and to trust, because trust and faith are really important values in improvisation and in all things. Just trusting that we'll get to another point that, is the right place for me to be.
I love this. I want to just take a second to soak it in and take a quick little break here. Let our listeners and myself selfishly soak all of this in. And I want to come back and talk a little bit about applied improv and mindfulness more with you. So let's take a little quick break. Soak it all in, folks. Soak it all in. Think where you're at in your improv journey and reflect on it. Enjoy that moment that you're in. We'll be right back. All right. And we're back with Pam Victor talking about all things improv and public speaking, performance. I mean, I'm enjoying every minute of this, Pam. Thank you for sharing a bit of yourself with us. And another aspect of your improv journey is doing applied improv. So you run the personal and professional development program at Happier Valley Comedy, which uses improv training and exercises to build foundational training skills such as communication, collaboration, creativity. So in your words, why should non-improvisers, people who haven't signed up to take improv, take these workshops of yours?
Well, if you're working in the working world and you've gotten a script to life, you don't need to take improv training.
Where'd they get that script? How'd they get that script? I want that script.
But if you are like most of us, if not all of us, and haven't gotten a script for life, improv training is vital for navigating everything in the world, because we are improvising our way through it. It became even more clear. I mean, obviously, I'm a proponent of the applications of improvisation, but over the pandemic, I just can't imagine how anybody navigated doing work or life during the pandemic without improv training skills, because I use them every day. I mean, I power used them.
Yeah.
We're improvising. So to be improvising without training feels like, tying one hand behind your back.
So your workshops help to metaphorically free that hand and get those skills that can help you through life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the foundation is quieting the inner critic and quieting down that imposter syndrome, which stops us from communicating, collaborating, innovating, being resilient, being in the moment.
Well, and how do you teach these things through like these exercises? And I teach applied improv, but just for our listeners who aren't familiar, like how do you make them see these things or experience these things?
It's tricky because they're all terrified.
Right.
So part of it is I'll do some talking and I'll say quieting the inner critic is really, really important to learn how to improvise, and improv is life. And so let's give you some of these skills. And the first skill we need is to quiet the inner critic. And so I'll do a little talking, but I love to do it through interaction. So sometimes I'll do a mind experiment. Well, I'll say to them, imagine you're about to do a proposal that uses a bunch of the skills that you have, but never quite in the way that you've done it before. And if it goes well, the whole company is going to know about it and profit from it. And if it doesn't go well, the whole company is going to know about it. So you sit down to write the proposal. What's going through your mind that has nothing to do with the proposal, right? And so,
yeah.
So, and then
but
you
the
get
company's not gonna. Everyone's gonna know, and the company's not gonna profit from it.
All the things right, and they're all variations of I'm gonna fail, right? It's just fear of failure, fear of I don't have enough time, but that's still part of failure. I'm not gonna have time to do it as well as I need to do it. Or I'll say we're about to do an improv exercise, which strikes fear into most people's hearts. It's called 7 things, and I'm going to ask you to list 7 things. Don't worry, anything you say is right. But before we start, what are you thinking right now? Right. And so often they're thinking things like, I'm not going to be able to do a good job. My brain's going to freeze. I'm going to say something embarrassing. I'm not going to be able to think of 7 things, so again, and so I have people write it down, all these thoughts. I say, okay, so those are messages from your internal messengers of unhelpful judgment and fear. And so we have it right there. And it's like, let me give you a few techniques to quiet those down so you can have as much fun as possible doing this exercise, doing 7 things, because, and I talk about how important joy and ease is. Because I was like, I want you to have joy and I want you to have ease. So what's stopping you from having joy and ease? And more often than not, it's stuff that our inner critic is telling us. And one of the things I teach is that those are all beliefs. They are not facts. They are lies, most often. They're story that we're making up. We don't know what the future is going to hold, but we make up those fears. That's natural because it comes from that part of our brains that's trying to protect us. So we can't stop it, as we said before, but there are some techniques to quieting it down. And one is like just giving it a name, like evil mind meanies. Because the name gives a little space between me and this internal messenger. The internal messenger is not me. It's not truth. It's not fact. It's just this little guy inside of me that holds fear and tries to protect me. And that's okay. I honor that guy. That guy is useful. If there's a fire, I don't want to sit here and be like, what's the most joyful, easeful path forward?
Right.
That guy's going to get in the driver's seat, and that's where it belongs. But just giving it a name is like, that's not the end all be all. Those fears are just feelings. They're not facts.
I like to call mine the imposter monster.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So then we'll talk about some techniques to quiet down the inner critic, and then we'll do some improv exercises in a circle or in pairs. More often than not, these days I'm doing it in pairs because people, since the pandemic, have gotten even more introverted. Like the idea of even just doing it in a whole circle of 20 people is intense for them. So let's just do it everybody in pairs at the same time or in a small group. And so we'll do some simple exercises, and then we stop and like, great, did you hear your inner critic? What were kind of some of the silly things that it was saying? What helped you have joy and ease? What stopped you from having joy and ease? What can we learn from it? And once that foundation is set, then we'll talk about whatever topic that the client has chosen, whether it's collaborating together or building resilience or establishing more connection or creative thinking and innovation or amplifying your authentic voice for public speaking or whatever it might be. So I'll lay on more improv exercises that help with that. And often I do teach the spirit of yes and through exercises. I don't teach it in improv class, but I do teach it in an applied improv because I think the concept is is strangely, I think, more easily applicable to the workplace. And I'm really, really clear that the spirit of yes and doesn't mean saying yes to everything anybody suggests to you.
Right. It's not Jim Carrey's yes man character.
Right, exactly. It's saying yes to accept the reality of the moment. Like a client comes up and they're unhappy with you. So I don't need to say yes to what they're suggesting I do instead, but I do need to be in acceptance that they are unhappy right now. And instead of like brushing it off or walking past it or, going into my head and making up stories, I just want to be there in that place with them. And also when we're innovating, the spirit of yes and is saying yes to allowing people to explore ideas. When we're in a brainstorming session, I'm always clear. We use this in my company all the time because my friend Scott doesn't go to yes and straight away. His brain works best from a yes, but or no place. Like he wants to stress test it before the idea's gotten legs under it. And I can't work that way. And because my innovative brain is our superpower, I'm like, I need you to just yes and this. It doesn't mean he's agreeing to the idea, but he's agreeing to explore this idea I have, whatever it might be. And sometimes when we just explore that idea together, and then he adds to it, like he builds on it. He's like, okay, I know we might not be doing this show that's, blah, 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 whatever it is, one weird idea I have. I call them my Lucy Ricardo ideas. Or my shower ideas. I get them in the shower when I'm walking the dog. And I was like, I got this crazy idea. And he's like, oh, okay. I have to say to him, we had to learn this together. And I was like, I need you to yes and me. Doesn't mean you're saying yes to it. It just means you're agreeing to explore the idea. And he's smart. He's so smart. So him building off of it is useful. And sometimes at the end, we get to something that actually works. Sometimes at the end, we get to something that I can see is not going to work. But at least I was heard out. Right? Because the innovators that we're working with are the magic. I mean, we need both. We need the innovators and we need the implementers.
I love that. That's a great explanation of how to use yes and for brainstorming purposes. And it doesn't work all the time, right? Like we're not saying to use it do you do it in every conversation or more like, hey, this is a brainstorming collaborative session. Let's use yes and.
I mean, I think the spirit of yes and could be useful in everything because again, it's just acceptance of the reality of the moment and the agreement to move forward together with joy and ease.
That's so true.
Peace and ease. So that's what the goal is. But yeah, it's easiest to see the applications in brainstorming sessions or problem solving sessions. So you'd be like, let's just yes and for a little while. We'll just throw out a whole bunch of wacky ideas. And then we'll start to use no, but, no, because, or, yes, but like we'll start to stress test it after we've gotten the ideas flushed out a little bit.
Yeah, I love that. And so you've recently started or you've created some mini online workshops focusing on wellness micro habits. Do you use improv exercises along with that and relate it to wellness?
Not always improv exercises, but it's all interactive in some way.
Oh, cool.
Because I think that's how people learn best and it's most fun and I like to have fun. And play is one of my happiness micro habits. So because play is so important and play has been shown to have all sorts of beneficial mental and physiological benefits for us. People who play feel younger, live longer, have more productive relationships, cooperate better. So play is one of the many habits. So we will do improv exercises in the play one. But I try to make everything as fun as possible. So even if we're talking about gratitude, which is, a very common micro habit that has tons of scientific evidence to show that it is beneficial for our health, I'll try to make it fun. We'll make a game out of it. So if I'm online, we'll do one thing is gratitude ABCs. So every day you'll take another letter of the alphabet and just think of one thing that you're grateful for that starts with that one letter of the alphabet. So it's
Oh, that's
literally
cool.
micro habits. They don't have to take long. They can take 30 seconds and you could still benefit from them if you do them every day. And then when I'm doing it online in the chat window, I'm like, great, let's see if we could get through the whole alphabet in the next minute. A, what are you grateful for? And like people are just jotting it down.
That's cool.
Yeah.
What are some of the other micro habits that you teach in those workshops?
There's something called positivity blueberries. That's what I call it. But it's just writing down 3 positive things at the end of the day, or thinking of them if you don't want to write them down. Because I think that looking for positivity is like going blueberry picking. When you first walk up to a bush, it looks like there are no blueberries there. And then you see one. And then once you see one, you see another one and another one. You get your blueberry eyes. You start to, because we're trained to see patterns. So if we train ourselves to look for blueberries, or for mushroom hunters to look for mushrooms, we'll start to see more of them, or 4-leaf clovers, right? Some people have trained their brains to do that. It's the same thing with positivity. Once we start to train our brains to look for positive, it becomes this lovely lifetime practice that you're going to be aware of what is the most positive moment in your day, and you'll be more present for it. So that's another one. There's something called 6 savoring soaking breaths. And that means just taking any time during the day, finding the thing that brings you joy and just sitting with it for 6 breaths, whether it's a sunset or a cup of tea or a piece of chocolate or a conversation or petting your cat, like whatever it is. Meditation is big. Again, like 1 or 2 minutes a day of meditation has just so much evidence to show that it's extremely beneficial for people. Intentional connection is one of them, because that's another huge habit that it's just a foundational habit. The longest running study on happiness comes out of Harvard. It's called something adult development. Dr. Robert Waldinger is the current director of it. It's been going for many years, many generations, out of Harvard. And he has a great TED Talk. But the spoiler of his TED Talk, don't listen if you don't want to hear the end. But the secret to happiness, his secret to happiness that they found is connection, people, relationships. Doesn't have to be a lot of them. It just has to be heart-to-heart ones. And then another one is altruism. So generosity is also a micro habit. This one tends to take a little bit longer. So if you're like interested in devoting 5 minutes a day to it, but just like, what can I do today to be an act of generosity? It could be really short, like holding the door open for someone, right? Or it could be paying for someone's coffee. It could be writing a check to a charity. It could be making dinner for your family when you didn't have to, or making dinner for a neighbor, or baking cookies for somebody and bringing them into the office. And that's a habit that comes from the Dalai Lama and the Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who together wrote a book called The Book of Joy, which is one of my favorite books in the whole wide world. And I highly recommend everybody read that. It's one that you could just like read little bits for a very long time and enjoy it. And I'll give away the ending of that. But altruism is the ultimate happiness habit, according to them. And they're pretty smart. So I'll take their word for it.
For sure. I would love to take that workshop. I think we could all benefit from that workshop. And I do wellness in full time. So that's so cool to hear it phrased and framed as micro habits and little bitty chunks, because sometimes we get so caught up in I've got to do all the things. And I love how you have it broken down and simplified.
Because if you try to do all the things, you'll do none of the things.
Right.
So
which is the story of my life.
So the idea is it's sustainable, because the magic happens. I call it the 30-day happiness experiment. So you're going to take 1, maybe 2 of these habits, no more. And you commit to trying to do them every day for 30 days. Because the magic starts happening around day 17, 18, 19. Like that's when the benefits start kicking in. That it becomes a daily habit. So if I do, and this is so easy to do online. This one actually translates very, very well to remote workshops. So if I have an hour or 2 hours, I'll go through a whole bunch of habits and then give you some habit keeping skills. I do it in a 30 days. So some clients hire me for the whole 30 days, and there's all sorts of other, we'll have a playtime, we'll have a guided meditation, we'll have habit check-ins, you'll have accountability buddies, like this is a whole big package. But then the most popular thing is these mini workshops. I call them lunch and laugh. And they're 30-minute online workshops where they're customized. So each client picks 3 or 4 or however many they want. And usually they're once a month. And we put them together in a package. And it's just focuses on one micro habit in that 30 minutes. So we might focus on gratitude. And I'll give you like 3 different or 4 different gratitude habits. And so you have a whole bunch of them. And now try them for 30 days. And then next month, I'll give you another one that you can try. And we, keep going. And you can do them with friends and you can buddy up and do them. And again, they're usually very interactive, whether it's something that you'll do with the whole group or in breakout rooms or just do on your own. I'm shying a little bit away from breakout rooms lately because I don't know about you, but I've noticed that as soon as I say that word, I lose half of the people that are on the call.
Yeah. And there's been a whole movement on LinkedIn too of like breakout rooms are not psychologically safe for some, and the introverts don't like it. And I get it. I think we've kind of hit some breakout room fatigue too. So I do understand. I love breakout rooms for the connection purpose, but I do understand others' critiques of it.
Yeah. So once we've established a culture of connection and support, then they could be used in a beneficial way.
Yes.
I love doing the half hour, like lunch and laughs, because it's just like this quick hit. A half hour online isn't too bad. You can eat lunch at the same time. It's interactive. So, I won't even call them a webinar because that's not, I don't know, webinar.
Yeah, we're webinared out too.
We're a little bit webinared out.
Yeah, for sure. Got to have some kind of interaction in there. And I don't count just put it like typing in the chat interaction. I know it is, but I feel like we could do a bit more too. I don't know. Yeah. I love your micro habits. I would love to see it at some point. Like, that's so cool. I'm so happy for you that you're doing this and people are using them. They sound so fun.
Yeah, I'm really enjoying it. And my brand new thing that I've been teaching at my school is an improviser's guide to mindfulness. So this is, my next step in following my own joy and ease in my own journey as an improviser. As during the pandemic, I've been getting much and more into meditation and part of being communities. I'm part of something called Cloud Sangha, which is an international online mindfulness community that's just amazing. I highly recommend it. One of the founders is Tara Brach, who's a meditation rock star, if you could call it that.
Yeah.
But I started meditating before the pandemic because I wanted to be able to tell my doctor that it didn't work for me because she kept saying, you should meditate more, you should meditate. And I was like, okay, fine. I'm going to do it for 30 days in this experiment. And then I'll tell you after 30 days that it might work for other people. It doesn't work for me. And that was like 1,372 days ago. It was, I've been meditating.
And so it actually work for you.
It does actually work for me, as it turns out. Yeah. And so I want to have a community of other like-minded people that are interested in experiencing mindfulness in meditation and in discussion, but also kind of off the mat in experiential play between us. Because I think a lot of improv games are mindfulness experiences. You can't play. Do you ever play? We call it Big Buddy. You might call it Big Booty. Do you know that game?
Yeah, I know that game.
We call it Big Buddy. You can't think of your day and play Big Buddy at the same time. You just can't.
Right. No.
You're 100% in it. Because it's taking on your brain.
You'll miss who's been called and who, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of the games are like that. You can't quickly think of 7 things, unusual names for a cat, or whatever, if you're playing 7 things, and think about what you're going to eat for dinner.
Right.
right? So it's a mindfulness habit. Sometimes I have students who get what you call that blank, I call the screen of the red screen of but you said, how you feel it sometimes in classes. People pay big money for that feeling. That's an expansive mind. That's a blank mind. That's being like you're having no thoughts. It's very hard to get to that space of having no thoughts. It would be ideal to have that experience without feeling an anxiety response.
Yes.
That would be ideal.
I've never thought of it that way. It's never been looked at as a good thing when it happens that like my mind is blank in an improv scene. But you're right. People pay big money on meditation retreats and stuff,
right?
To have their mind be blank for hours. So,
well, it never gets blank for hours, I think. But yes, but even for that moment,
right?
Even
that's how they sell it, but no.
Right? It would be nice, but no. Yeah. So yeah, I love having mindfulness in connection with other people, and improv games are fantastic for facilitating that.
I've been exploring like improv and wellness and the idea of getting out of your head and into your body too. And that's just being present, another variation of being present and in the moment, but just in physical activity, which is very important to me. How can we get out of our heads and our shoulds and our to-do list? I got to do this, and just get into our body, do a movement that feels good. A little dance break, a little stretch break. It doesn't have to be forever long. It's just, instead of calling it exercise, it's getting out of your head into your body. And what is your body feeling?
Right. And also we could get out of our heads and into the moment. And being of service to the moment. So the reason I love the core value of being of service, the reason we practice this a lot in all my improv classes, is that if I'm thinking about you, it's selfless, right? And it's easier for me to maybe take a big risk because I'm being of service to you and this thing that we're creating together. And so I'm going to jump out there, even though I might not have a great, quote unquote, great idea, but I'm going to jump out there because I know I need to be of service to you. And we're all natural helpers. So that instinct is in us already.
I love that. I don't think of it that way either. And I love it. I want to, next time when I do my practices and stuff, I really want to take one or two. I can't take all, can't do all the things because then I'll do none of the things, but just take one or two of these tidbits and really like be mindful of focusing on this in my practice or in my class and just see what I notice. And I'll let you know what comes up for sure.
Yeah. And that's part of the book that I'm working on actually, is I'll be like, now do it in practice. I can't remember what it's called, like play in practice or something. And I'll say exactly what you're talking about. Like, think about being of service and go into your next class. And that's your intention. Like, try to learn whatever the teacher's telling you and try to, have as much fun as possible. But you're also your personal intention. And you can tell the other class, the rest of the class, hey, my intention today is to be of service to you. So make sure I stay true to that and tell me how I'm doing or how I'm missing the mark. Because this is it. It's all about getting it on our feet. It's all about getting your reps. That's all improv is. Mm-hmm. You could learn everything important about improv in about 3 months, probably, of weekly classes, maybe.
Yeah.
Pretty much. I mean, I guess, the basics, the foundation.
The basics, the core skills, yeah.
But then then you have to get it up on its feet 100, 1,000 times longer.
Which is where the hard part starts, and you get really into your head. I shouldn't assume it's you. I get really into my head, and, and there's a whole journey and process, and it's worth it though. It's totally worth it.
Right. And even, and is it hard? I don't know, but there are challenges to it. And then there are just the most fun ever.
Yeah.
Right. These people that you get to meet in improv class are just the best.
I agree.
Yeah. Just nice people, because there we are together. Like, our jobs collectively are to take care of each other, to have each other's back. Sometimes when I'm advertising improv, I'll be like, it's comedy without a net. But the truth is, we have a huge net. It's each other. The biggest possible net is
Yeah.
everybody there with you.
It's the most supportive net I've ever experienced, too.
It really is. It really is.
Oh, I love it. Pam, what an amazing discussion. I hope it helped others, but I'll tell you, it sure helped me. You're a joy and an ease you're to listen to. I mean, you make it so fun, and I can imagine that your workshops are just so helpful and inspiring to those who get to experience them.
I hope so. I hope so.
I know our listeners are listening and learning and loving every moment of this, and they're wondering, where can they find out more about you?
HappierValley.com is where all my stuff lives now. HappierValley.com. The nickname of the area where I live in Western Massachusetts is the Happy Valley, and we make the Happy Valley happier. So that's why we're Happier Valley.
I love that name. That's so interesting. As a natural optimist, you have settled into Happy Valley too.
Right.
You've manifested and put it out there, and look where you are living now. Happy Valley.
Happy Valley. The happiest place in the Happy Valley. Yep.
Oh, that's awesome. Any presentations or shows to plug?
Unless you're in Western Massachusetts, I'm not doing anything nationally right now or internationally. But if you're in Western Massachusetts, come on by Hadley, Massachusetts. Yeah, come check us out. We'd love to have you. Tell me where you heard. I'll be there most likely. So tell me that you heard me on Dana's podcast, and that'll be so cool.
That will be so cool. It'll happen too. Put it out there. It'll happen. I've never been to Massachusetts, which I'm like so ashamed. Like, I've never been to Boston. Come on. God, that's shameful.
Yeah.
But
I don't know if that's shameful, but it's a goal. Yeah.
It is a goal for sure. And I would love to make a little journey and trek, 2-hour trek out and visit and see your place. That would be amazing.
It's so beautiful. Come out the third week of October. That is the jewel of the crown of Western Massachusetts. There's just no more beautiful place on earth during that week.
That's where all the like fall pictures and scenes you see. It's even better in person.
Churches, town commons, fairs. Yeah, it's really beautiful. I'm in love with the place I live.
That's awesome. And we didn't get into it, but you have a TED Talk that is on YouTube. People can find it on YouTube, called Meet Your Inner Critic and Tell It to Pipe Down, which we've kind of referenced the evil mind meanie, and you go over that. So I will definitely put that in the show notes too for people to see it, because I listened to it and I love it. I just related so much to it and love how you pull in the techniques of improv and how it can help. Tell your inner critic to just pipe down and shut up. Stop judging, because it's not being helpful.
You're right. But first you thank it, right?
Yes, I skipped that step.
Because it's just trying to protect us. So I know.
Be nice to your inner evil mind meanie, and then tell it to pipe down.
Yeah, in fact, I was doing a workshop during the lockdown online, and one of my students was like, "I don't like evil mind meanie," and I don't call it that much anymore, because it just didn't resonate with him, because it's not evil, because it really does have the best intention.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah. So call it whatever you want, or you see it, how you view it. Mine's a monster in my head.
Yep.
A helpful monster sometimes, but judgmental monster too. So that's how I view it.
Yep.
And thank you for sharing so much of just your journey and your joy of improv and how it's evolved throughout the years. I look forward to our paths crossing again and chatting more, because we could just sit and drink tea and talk about improv a whole lot longer too.
Oh my gosh, I know. I guess that improv cookie monster is not completely gone, because I love these conversations.
I mean, you just talked about improv for an hour 45, so it's not fully gone. There are little crumbles of cookies still left there. Pam, thank you so much. Eternally grateful for you.
Thank you.
Loved this moment with you. I appreciate it.
I appreciate it too. Take good care and keep having as much fun as possible in improv in all places.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for joining us and enjoying this episode, hopefully. I truly appreciate you listening in. I learned so much from Pam. I hope you did as well. I love her energy and enthusiasm for improv. And even though she says there's no improv cookie monster left, there is. There totally is. And she's helping other people now find their improv cookie monster and just eat up all the improv cookies out there. She's doing some amazing work at her Happier Valley Comedy Theater. It's awesome. It's so cool to see. And I love that she said that she started a blog and started interviewing people about their improv experience and teaching improv and all that. Like, she just wanted to learn all of those things. As I heard that and was listening in, I was like, oh, that's very similar to what I'm doing, just in podcast form. My writing skills aren't the greatest, and it would take me a long time to write a blog, but this is my audio blog. This podcast is my audio blog for my improv journey. I'm just starting out. I'm in year 3 of improv. This is my documentation now of how the journey has been. And I'm inviting other improvisers on, people I've met in class, to just share what they've learned from improv. And that's super cool. I didn't really think of it like that when I first started the podcast. I mean, I wanted to interview improvisers and just kind of share how improv helps everyone who takes it. But kind of looking at it as like my audio blog and my documentation of my journey, that's really cool. And I can look back later and kind of see the growth and the takeaways and how it helped me keep going in my journey and pursue this passion. That's so cool. And I am sure, and I assume, that when Pam started the blog, that she did not expect to interview TJ and Dave for the blog. And I'm sure she didn't expect it to lead to a book, but it did. Like, that's the outcome that came from her, one, asking and not being afraid of people telling her no, and two, putting herself out there and doing the thing, like having a creative outlet of having a blog and interviewing people and asking them. You never know what can come up until you do something, until you start. Yes, it's all uncertain, and yeah, you're not sure sometimes, like, what's the point? What's going to come of this? But if you can say yes and to the reality and just yes yourself, say yes and to yourself, the possibilities are endless, and it's only you that's limiting you. So that was really cool to see how that blog and those interviews eventually also landed her writing a book, co-authoring a book with TJ and Dave. That's so huge. Oh my God, that's amazing. I'm so grateful for Pam sharing her story and her journey, also her experiment too, about can she make a living doing what she loves? And the answer was yes. So here's my question for you. If you could make a living doing what you love, what would it be? Would you be willing to try that experiment? I know it's hard. I know it is not realistic for everyone to try, but would you be able or interested in trying that experiment? Would you be able to say yes and to yourself and try it out? It's cool to think. It's really scary. To be honest, I have a side business, so I have not tried that experiment yet, but it's great to hear that it worked for her and it's still working. The pandemic surely tried to ruin that, but it didn't, and she's still going. Happier Valley Comedy's still going, thank goodness. Let me know If anything came up or resonated with you in this episode, let me know what you would love to be able to do. Let me know what your passion would be, what you would love to make money doing as your passion. You can reach out to me at dana@improvlyspeaking.com. That's my email address. You can also message me on Instagram at improvlyspeaking or on LinkedIn. I'm at Dana Gowan. And then you can find more information about me and my services and such on improvlyspeaking.com. I am truly grateful for Pam sharing her story and sharing so many good tidbits. I do feel like I get so down on myself sometimes and I'm like, improv is hard, blah, blah, blah. And I just love her perspective of just you're doing the thing. Like, have fun with it. It's not meant to be hard. Like, it's meant to be full of joy and ease. And sometimes it doesn't feel very joyful or easeful. And maybe it's because I'm coming at it the wrong way. So I will definitely listen to this episode time and time again when I'm feeling a little down on improv or my improv skills, because this is super helpful to hear. I really appreciate you listening in and joining us today. Thank you for supporting Improvly Speaking. I'm so happy you're here, and I'll talk to you next time.